Hey, what's up guys, my name is Jeremy, and I'm pretty much obsessed with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I've given myself 2 weeks to recreate my own Spider-Man in the style of the film. To do that, first I needed to outline exactly what that even meant. So in part 1 I covered the very broad strokes on how to recreate a style of Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. In this video, I'm going to dig deeper and begin modeling my character. I've really become so fascinated by the art of this movie, to the point that I'm even surprising myself with how much I'm obsessing over this. But I'm just such a fan, and I haven't been this jazzed about an animation in over 10 years. And in the days following part 1, I spent some time digging into the art even further. So sit back and let's take an even closer look at this masterpiece. The Art of book was completely sold out on Amazon and in stores in my immediate area. An hour before closing though, I called my local comic book shop and they had 1 copy left. So I raced out and grabbed it and poured over the entire thing front to back, basking in the heat of sizzling artwork emanating from the pages. The book features many artists, but only a small handful had the majority of the credits. Artists like Shiyoon Kim, who is the lead designer on most of the characters, Jesús Alonso Iglesias, Rob Ruppel, Patrick O'Keefe, Omar Smith, and Yashar Kassai. Out of all the artists though, there is one in particular that requires a special mention. Before I even saw the film, I'd scanned a short list of artists that worked on it, many of whom I knew back in animation school long ago, and I checked out their most recent portfolios. But of all the ones I sifted through, there was one that immediately grabbed my attention, and I instantly thought, that's the one. That's the feeling the whole Spider-Verse aesthetic gives me. And I don't mean to shortchange the team in any way by saying this, but of all the beautiful pre-production work I'd seen, Alberto Mielgo's work was the soul of what I was seeing and feeling from the trailers being put out. That X factor. As I reviewed each artist, many of them thanked Alberto for bringing them onto the project, and it was becoming increasingly clear that he was the leading dude for this viz dev. It seems there was a little bit of a kerfuffle though that went down during production, and Alberto was dismissed from the team and ended up being given a visual consultant credit instead of art director, which is something he wrote about in a post on his website. While this particular point may not be directly related to the focus of this video, Alberto's fiery passion is critical to the outcome of the film. As quoted on his website, he was tired of the style of animated films being put out in recent years and wanted so much more for the medium of animation. And whether or not he was the only person between directors or producers to feel this way, he was definitely the first one in to execute it.
Got married for the 4th time today in New York City. Hubby number 4 is representing the 54-year-old.
While digging deeper into Spider-Verse's unique style, my primary focus was to figure out how Sony managed to accomplish the 2D line work overlaid onto the 3D models. It was still something I was scratching my head about. As mentioned in part 1, I had many theories, but no confirmation. It wasn't until I found this development gem, uploaded by Raffaello Vecchione. According to him, this was modeling exploration done by Alberto Mielgo, Jesús Alonso, Rob Ruppel, and Peter Chan. So in fact, the line work does seem like it was done in 3D as opposed to a 2D overlay system. This would be in line with my suspicions because if you frame by frame certain shots, the line work is very grounded in space and only changes when absolutely necessary. And what's interesting is that the entire 3D space is made up of these 2D cards. The models aren't traditionally built, they are 3D models built with floating 2D cards and textured in a painterly style. So a lot of the stuff that you think is 3D is actually 2D floating planes. My immediate homemade solution was to recreate line work in VR, using an app like Gravity Sketch, Tilt Brush, or Quill. My theory was that I could model something in Zbrush, import the OBJ into those apps, then apply some floating line work on top of it to recreate the effect. I wouldn't be able to solve the animation problem yet, but as I said in part 1, there are only lines in mid to close-up shots anyway. For my static render purposes, using VR would actually work. Next, I had to experiment with a few of the apps to figure out which one had brushes that could produce the stroke style I was after. That thin, ribbon-like stroke with the ability to have tapered and delicate ends. In the end, I settled on Quill, and even if it wasn't the way that Sony did it, it was good enough for my purposes. The only problem, as is typical in VR, was accuracy. I suspect that whatever Sony used, it was probably more of a traditional 2D-based software they could use a Cintiq with for way steadier control. All that was really left to figure out on the bucket list was to make a few toon shaders. If you really take a close look, there's maybe only 3 obvious tone effects used in the film. First, you have the long diagonal hatching strokes. Second, you have square halftone transitions from highlighted areas like the forehead or cheek that transition quickly into transparency. And lastly, you have rim highlights that appear to be using the dot pattern. So I needed 3 separate shader effects, and they didn't all have to be done in one shader. I could render out different passes and then composite them together in Nuke. This particular shot of Miles riding in the cop car gave me many clues into how the shader seemed to work. Pretty simply, for the hatching shader, once the luminance of the form reached a particular threshold value, it became hatched. I could easily recreate this by rendering out a shadow ID pass in like red, then use the red shape only as a mask for the hatching pattern. The other clue was that the hatching effect didn't really follow the contours of the form and stayed flat towards the camera, which honestly makes things easier. There are times when the hatching flowed in opposing directions, but that would just mean using a different shadow mask. There are many good examples of people's halftone shaders, but I had no idea how to tackle it. So I stayed up all night and I experimented the hell out of it, and finally I came up with this donut. Or maybe I should call it a bagel.
Selecting a bagel?
Basically, you use the surface luminance node in Maya to drive the scale of the noise texture. The more light, the smaller the noise. Finally, I was confident I had all the technical barriers down and I could start making this happen. As with anything, I started with some 2D sketches first. Over the years, my attitude towards concept art has really shifted. For a while, the line between concept art and illustration started to blur for me. But when I got into 3D, it was very clear, and I was able to start treating concept art like concept art. They're meant to be carefree exploration, to help find the direction so that when I start sculpting, I know where I'm heading. Ultimately, I want to put a fraction of the time into the 2D side that I put into 3D. I considered doing my own outfit for my Spider-Man and throw in some nods to my city and the clothing, but I already had a ton of work ahead of me and I just decided to replicate Miles' outfit completely. My idea was pretty simple, and I just wanted to make him a mixed Asian Filipino and throw in a couple nods to Toronto if I could. Alright, so let's get on with it. So I sculpted the model in Zbrush, and I'm using Spotlight to import reference images. So I took screenshots from the trailers, different concept work, different development work, and I'm using that as my reference. 2 of the most critical references that I gathered were from Andrea Blasich clay sculptures, and also paintovers from Yashar Kassai. And the reason why they were so important was that they gave me a full body idea of the form and the sculpture itself of both Peter Parker and of Miles. Miles and Peter Parker are very similar in terms of their anatomy design, but Miles is obviously a teenager and he's less developed than the musculature that Peter Parker has. When sculpting in ZBrush, my main brushes are Move, Inflate, Clip Curve, Clay Buildup, Trim Dynamic, and Standard. Inflate is for volume, Move and Clip Curve are for shape and silhouette, Trim Dynamic and H Polish are for plane and angle definition, and Clay Buildup and Standard are for mass. Oh, and I also use pinch quite a bit because pinch is really good for gathering corners and bringing sharpness where everything is round. Then just use the pinch and suddenly you can turn a sphere or a cylinder into a nice cornered edge. And basically what I'm doing right now is, if you've never used ZBrush before, I'm using something called Dynamesh. So Dynamesh is essentially a mesh that you never have to worry about the topology for. So you can sculpt the craziest shape, and just by hitting Control and dragging off the model, it'll retopologize the model so that you have a nice sculpting surface again. And you can do this endlessly, so it's incredibly forgiving, and it's literally the most freeing way to sculpt. These models sculpted by Omar Smith are absolutely gorgeous. Like, I actually think this is some of the best stylized anatomy I've ever seen. Every single shape and form is just carefully sculpted and designed and simplified. So it was really important to me to get these really aggressive and planar shapes and forms. There's a tendency to slide into that kind of blobbiness in ZBrush, and kind of the mark of the skilled sculptor to me is somebody that can just create really clearly defined forms. So through the studies that I researched, Miles is 7 heads tall, and to start with, I wanted to sculpt his Spider-Man suit. So first I just blocked out the masses, you know, the head, the chest, the pelvis, the legs, the arms, and then I focused in on the hands, because the hands are super important to me, and any character really, because they are one of the main acting tools that a character has. And hands always just make me nervous, just because, like, hands are one of those things where if they're not done right, it just ruins the character for me. Not like other people's characters, but for me, it's like, if I do a bad job on the hands, I'm gonna be pissed. Like, the whole character is garbage to me. So I tackled the thing I was dreading the most first. I just wanted to get it out of the way. The hands are very blocky compared to a lot of CG characters these days. Deliberately, like, they're very chunky and square. without any real attempt to put like realistic anatomy or too much knuckle. It was really just blocks. They honestly look like little French fries. So I did a pass and I was pretty happy with it, and sure enough, when I popped those hands onto the block out, it immediately felt better. I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is starting to look like Miles a little bit. And then after I found the reference images, I had to go back in and refine those shapes even further. And when I talk about elegance, like look at the knuckles, right? Look at the knuckles on the top of the palm. I kind of had just these blobby standard brush strokes going up towards the wrist. And then I look at Omar's sculpt and it's like these beautiful simplified triangles. Simple, confident forms are the motto for this sculpt.
Several days later.
The main reason why I spend so long on this sculpting phase is because if you get it right, it actually looks good and looks interesting just like this. You don't need textures, you don't need fancy rendering or lighting or anything like that. But you can already feel the shapes are speaking, right? They're speaking to his agility, his silhouette, his energy. And that to me is the most important thing. Everything else is just extra. That just makes it look like sweet. But this is the most important part to me anyway. So I really wanted to focus on getting an interesting silhouette, trying to make it as close to the film as I could. Obviously not like, I'm not going to kill myself over making it exact, because I can't. Like I don't think that would even be possible. There's not enough reference, and you just gotta kind of make it up yourself. But to me, this silhouette, like I have this material on my UI, right? Just so you can, you don't look at any of the detail, but this is the stuff that matters. This is the stuff that makes it awesome. So if he has an interesting shape from all angles, really, like I redid the thighs here because this muscle, I just wanted that to pop more. Kind of more like the that one frame where he's jumping off the taxi, you can see this muscle popping up. So yeah, I'm finally happy with it. Like this isn't refined. I haven't even attached all the pieces together with Dynamesh, but I'm actually pretty satisfied with where it is. And it's only once I have this part done that I feel like I can move on to the refinement stage.
Behold, this is the hole of the tarantula. Do you want to see the tarantula itself? Here hangs its web. Touch it so that it trembles. There it comes willingly. Welcome, tarantula. Your triangle and symbol sits flat on your back. And I also know what sits in your soul.